Right, so we've just been chatting about business storytelling. One thing I'm not clear about is how in the middle of a recession would anyone, why would they be wanting to spend money on this when, let's face it, a lot of companies are actually thinking about cutting back at the moment?
It's a good question, and it's something I'm very aware of, having been a training manager myself, you know, some years ago. In the middle of a recession, very often organisations think, right, we've got to cut back. Where do we cut? We cut on the training budget. And trainers and coaches and L&D people that I talk to, particularly at the moment, their main concerns are getting the message across. That, you know, they still have to train people in certain things. It's getting the message across in a way which is effective, it's speedy, and it's going to be remembered. And this is where business storytelling actually comes into its own. It's sometimes accused of being soft and fluffy. You know, we tend to think of storytelling as being something to do with children, but the sort of story and narrative that I'm concerned with is actually helping that process. It actually helps to get the message across in a way which is quicker and more effective and is certainly memorable.
Well, that's interesting. So how does it actually do that? What is the difference between a story and you know, a normal presentation that we're all used to at work?
Well, what a story is doing is actually encouraging what we call whole brain learning. So it's encouraging both hemispheres of the brain to work together. So you've got the left hemisphere, which is processing the information, processing the facts, and you've got the right hemisphere of the brain is doing I'm doing it now, the visualising, the contextualising, the imagining the characters. And what story encourages us to do is to use both of those sides simultaneously, which is something you don't usually get. You tend to get one or t'other, but you don't tend to get them working together in that way. So storytelling actually, it encourages us to take in information much more readily. In fact, there was some work done by an American psychologist, Jerome Bruner, and he discovered that information taken in the form of a story is something like 20 times more readily, easily remembered than information just in disconnected facts.
Right, that's amazing. And so it has actually been scientifically proven then as well, the benefits of storytelling.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, over the years and over the research that I've done when I've been writing my books, and practical work that I've found myself as a trainer, you know, I know that it works far more easily. So I find that if I go back to an organisation, you know, say in 2-3 years' time, people have forgotten all about me, which is understandable, but they remember the story that I've told them, and they go, oh, I remember you told us a story about us.
Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So
and
it's
I
a story.
suppose thinking about it, we do remember stories.
We do. I mean, from children. Unless you're a very sad person like me and you're reading these things all the time, I would guess that you haven't probably read the story of The Ugly Duckling or Cinderella, you know, maybe for say 10 or 20 years. But I bet if I asked you, you could tell me those stories almost word for word. Now, when you think about other forms of communication that we have, like email and text or, you know, whatever, if you think back to an email you had last week, I'm just thinking ones that I've had now, I bet you can remember them in the same way, let alone 10 years ago.
It's interesting, the only ones that you do remember are the ones where there is some sort of story or emotional connection.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And that's another reason, one of the neurological reasons why we know that story is remembered, because in story there's very often emotion. So in a story there might be curiosity or interest or humour very often, or even anger or pathos. But anytime there is emotion involved, we know that triggers memory, and so that's why these things are remembered.
Right, so just to recap then, so in actual fact, although using stories seems a kind of a long-winded thing to begin with, it actually speeds up the learning process.
Yeah.
And so it makes learning and development people actually more efficient. They can achieve more in a shorter period of time.
Yeah.
And also the results that they get are longer lasting, so they don't have to go back and repeat the learning as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they can get it across much more quickly. The other thing, just to say, that I find L&D people find so relevant, is the fact that story can actually overcome resistance. So we've talked about being in recession at the moment, and a lot of L&D people I'm talking to are saying we have to get people to take on new procedures, to take on new ways of doing things, to take on more work in the middle of a recession. And what story does, when you listen to a story, it actually bypasses that normal resistance. So what you're doing neurologically is your brain is working at a different level. There is different brain activity, and there again that's been proven by scientists. And what we're encouraging is people go into the alpha brain waves, and at that level is what we call relaxed awareness, and you find that it overcomes the normal resistance that people have to change.
Right, so in practical terms, so if, say, we need to, well, the worst case scenario is where we have to make people redundant.
Yeah.
Or, like you say, if people's jobs have to change,
Yes,
become more automated or something like that,
yes.
To increase efficiency,
Yeah.
then the methodologies that you use can actually help the company to keep its employees kind of on side, as it were.
Exactly, and keep them motivated and keep them engaged. And I've seen it happen. You know, I've seen it happen. So you can tell there's a physical difference in people's demeanour when they go into this alpha state. And I found then that the information or the message or whatever you want to get across them after you've got them into this state, it just it flows far more easily.
Right. So in actual fact, yeah, it's probably more important then to be using storytelling in what's a tough economic climate.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So how can we do that? How can our trainers become more acquainted with the storytelling technique? Do you run courses or anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's something that I find a lot of L&D people say to me, oh, well, we love the idea, and I know lots of people have thankfully bought my books. People still feel a bit wary, a bit unsure as to how to use them. And it is the type of thing that you can't just lunge in and do. It needs a bit of skill enhancement. So for a number of years now, I've been running what I call masterclass workshops for trainers or coaches, or for OD consultants and professionals, and that will teach people the skills of storytelling. So things like, how to get them out, how to tell the story, how you can use it, what type of story you would use, and so on. And then I also, and have done over a period of time, have run in-house workshops for usually the larger organisations.
Right, and so presumably with the in-house workshops, you could probably tailor that, could you,
very much
to the company's specific needs.
Yeah, very much so. Depending on what the nature of the organisation is, and I do that for both public and private sector.
Right, so I can definitely see how that would be useful for an organisation. And the public workshops, are they external venues or something? Why?
Yeah, I tend to run them, throughout the UK, both in the north and the south. Wherever there is demand, really.
Right. So now that I'm interested in this, how could I actually, what is the next step that I'd need to take?
If a trainer or a coach or anybody is interested, then if they drop us an email at info@success-stories.co.uk, or keep in touch with the website, which is www.success-stories.co.uk, and we publicise the up and coming events on there.